Welcome to the Creative Penn podcast. I'm Joanna Penn, thriller author and creative entrepreneur, bringing you interviews, inspiration and information on writing craft and creative business. You can find the episode show notes, your free author blueprint and lots more at thecreativepenn.com, and that's Penn with a double N. And here's the show. Hello creatives, I'm Joanna Penn, and this is episode number 772 of the podcast, and it is Friday, the 20th of September 2024 as I record this. In today's show, I'm talking about selling books in person at live events with Leslie Lefebvre. And I am generally super resistant about in-person sales, so it's good to hear Mark's perspective and tips, and also why in-person events are more important than ever to help us double down on being human in an age of AI. We talk about creating connections as more important than immediate sales, how to make sure your in-person event is a success, practical things like QR codes and payment machines, mistakes authors make, energy management, and more. I also wanted to mention a site I found, beventi.co, beventi.co, which we don't discuss in our interview, but someone recommended it to me. It lists author events, signings, and enables pre-orders of books, so you can then take them to events. It looks really useful, so you can also check that out in relation to the topic of this episode, beventi.co, links in the show notes, and the discussion with Mark is coming up in the interview section. In publishing things, Written Word Media share their reader survey results and offer some insights and tips. Readers appreciate consistency. 61% of readers are more likely to stick with an author who publishes frequently, particularly in series-heavy genres. So try to develop a consistent publishing schedule, even if that is once a year, and consider using pre-order campaigns. And I was thinking about this. I definitely do buy some authors who only put out one book a year, but they often put it out in the same month. So September is actually quite a regular month for some of the authors I follow. And so that it's only once a year, but I do know it's coming. So it doesn't have to be like once a month or anything like that. Also, I was thinking being consistent around emails is also a good idea. This is something I also struggle with. I'm pretty good on this list, the Creative Penn email list, but my JF Penn list, I have to remind myself to email at least once a month. Also, readers are voracious. The report says, on average, readers reported reading between 11 and 12 books a month. And remember, this is a survey from Written Word Media, whose audience are mostly ebook readers and skew to the heavy consumers, many of whom use Kindle Unlimited. So this is definitely not the average population. This is the heavy use readers who are looking for bargains. Author tip, since readers consume so many books, maintaining a steady stream of content, whether it's through series, anthologies, standalones, and also bundles, collections, and other things. This is also where recommending other books in your genre is always a good idea. You cannot satisfy readers on your own, and I include recommended books in my fiction email list every month or two. Also, in the survey on reviews, 64% of respondents said reviews are important for their book selection process, but only 14% of readers leave reviews very often. Many are willing to review if prompted, but they need a little nudge. And this is a really good point. You must encourage readers to leave reviews by including a polite ask at the end of your book, offering bonus content in exchange for honest feedback, or simply reaching out through your newsletter and asking for reviews. You can also create an advanced reader team. I have my Penn friends for my JF Penn list who get many of my books early, and most of them will generally review within a week or two of launch. So there are lots more tips in the article at writtenwordmedia.com. Then Russell Nolte has an article on the author stack, which fits with the theme of today's show. It's called How Do I Market Myself Without Feeling Gross About It? He starts by sharing some hard truths. He says, almost nobody sees what you do, even if you have an audience, and even fewer people click on the things you are doing to buy it. Ouch. This is harsh, but is true, and I know this from experience. A good result from a sales campaign is 1 to 2% of your entire audience buying, which means at least 98% don't buy, even if they know about it. Even if they do want to buy it, they might not have the money for it. And he says everyone in the world has their own stuff going on that's more important to them than anything you are doing, unless it's directly related to helping them with their stuff. So you need a lot more people to know about you and follow you in order to get any sales at all. And even the biggest companies struggle with this. So yes, when you think, maybe I'll just put my book out there and people will miraculously find it, look at the marketing that the biggest companies in the world do. Russell says, if you're failing at this, it's probably because you're simply not balancing the maths equation properly. It's not you or people hating you. Like with most things, math is the problem and the solution. You have effectively exposed your work to 0% of the world's population, which means you have nothing but upside to get your work out there. It's financially impossible in a capitalist system that if you show some people something that interests them, some percentage of them will pay for it. And that's a really good thing to keep in mind. So yes, it's a numbers game. The more people you talk to, the more people will hear about you and make a decision about your work. And the more people will decide to buy. If nobody engages with you, it either means you haven't done a very good job finding people who care, and that's really important because if you're just scattergunning people with your books, that's not people who care. You have to find that sub-niche who do care about what you're doing. Or, he says, you aren't making them feel seen. If no one buys from you, it means you haven't made something people care about, or you've gathered the wrong people, or you haven't gathered enough of them, or you suck at explaining what you made. Every single one of these are fixable issues. So yeah, there's loads in this article. I thought it was really good and I recommend theauthorstack.com. Russell's sharing quite a lot of good stuff right now. Also, Russell is one half of Writer MBA with Monica Lionel, and they have a new Kickstarter out now for a new nonfiction book called $8,333. 12 concepts for authors to make $8,333 per month, which is 6 figures per year. 12 battle-tested, proven strategies to help authors write great books, grow their audience, and scale a thriving business in 12 months. I bought the ebook because I think Russell and Monica have some great ideas and we could all do with learning more. You can find that on Kickstarter. Just search Writer MBA or links in the show notes. In AI things, Draft Digital shares the results of their AI training survey, and you won't be surprised at the result. 45% of authors said they were not interested in licensing, 31% said yes, they were interested, I was one of those, and 25% said maybe. So I really hope Draft Digital do this next year, as if those 25% shifted to yes, then at least they'd have the interest to look into it. But it seems more education is needed. As they say in the post, a near universal concern expressed by respondents is that authors are reluctant to train the machines they fear might one day replace them. Oh yes, the common fear, but I hope today's interview and many of the things I've talked about on this show, there are lots of reasons we don't need to be worried. I mean, even if the AI suddenly gets consciousness and wants to write books because they are driven by this need to create, it's still about human connection and reaching readers. So this is not something I worry about at all. There's a lot more information in the survey. You can go and look at it, but I'll read the final paragraph. It says, for Draft Digital authors and publishers who were excited by the survey and the prospect of establishing new income streams, yes, that was me, and to those of you who are interested, we understand you're probably disappointed that Draft Digital will not introduce such a service in the near term. For survey respondents opposed to all things AI, please know we heard your concerns and we thank you for articulating them so fully. I can only imagine the responses they got. We will only enter this market if and when we see an opportunity to protect author and publisher interests. For Draft Digital's potential supply chain partners, we will continue to engage with you to design systems, practices and policies that work for the mutual benefit of rights holders and rights licensees. So good on Drafter Digital, first of all, for doing a survey, and secondly, for listening to the majority of their market, because clearly they got a lot of things that said don't do this, and they went with that. I am disappointed. I'm definitely still open to data licensing. I think it's really important income stream for the future, but there are lots of other companies who are looking at this, so we shall see. I fully expect in the next year there to be other opportunities. And while authors are not pursuing licensing deals in this case, other companies continue to do so. The latest is Lionsgate partnering with Runway. Lionsgate is a film and TV company that produces things like The Hunger Games, the John Wick franchise, La La Land, and shows like Mad Men and Orange is the New Black. They have a lot of IP. In the press release, they say, Runway is a visionary, best-in-class partner who will help us utilise AI to develop cutting-edge, capital-efficient content creation opportunities, said Lionsgate Vice Chair Michael Burns. Several of our filmmakers are already excited about its potential applications to their pre-production and post-production process. We view AI as a great tool for augmenting, enhancing and supplementing our current operations. That is exactly the point. Augmenting, that's how I think about it. It's not artificial intelligence, it's augmenting intelligence. We're committed to giving artists, creators and studios the best and most powerful tools to augment their workflows and enable new ways of bringing their stories to life. The history of art is the history of technology, and these new models are part of our continuous efforts to build transformative mediums for artistic and creative expression. The best stories are yet to be told. I love that. I absolutely love that. The history of art is the history of technology, and we want to build transformative mediums. This is exactly where I want to go with this. When I use AI tools, I can do so much more than I can do on my own. These tools enhance me, they amplify me. And you can check out the Blood Vintage book trailer, which I made with Runway, and the tutorial is in my Patreon. If you're a patron, you can find that. It is so much fun to turn my ideas into video. And I want to do so many more creative things with these tools. So links in the show notes. And I really hope authors get into licensing before we are left behind. In personal news, and this is related to the topic of the show today, I've mostly been exhausted this week and on the edge of getting ill because I pushed myself way out of my comfort zone again. I did a full-day networking course in London last Saturday, which was excellent. It was run by Chris Jones, who also runs the London Screenwriters Festival, and I'll put a link in the show notes. I highly recommend it for introverts like me who struggle with in-person events, and obviously, it's run in London twice a year or something, so maybe you can find something similar closer to wherever you are in the world. But actually doing training on networking, I think, is something I should have done years ago. I've done training on professional speaking, which is a very different skill and something I actually feel much more comfortable on stage than I do in the crowd. But this really helped. There was a lot of mindset stuff and then practical sessions where we practiced networking. And it was, it wasn't quite fun, but it was really effective. And then in the evening, there was a network event with hundreds of film and TV people, producers, actors, and lots of other roles that I learned about. There's like a whole new vocabulary I'm learning about film and TV. It was seriously intense, both the day and the evening, but I pushed my comfort zone and went for it. Now, I'm not shy, so I don't have a problem talking to people, but one-on-one, for example, I'm just very happy being silent and on my own and generally just don't need to interact with people. And I know many of you listening will totally understand this. Many of you will also be shy and have social anxiety. And I generally use a drink or two to help push me into these things. But armed with the new mindset techniques, I did my first networking event ever with no alcohol. And this is actually a really big deal, and I'm very proud of myself. I always thought it was necessary for me to have that drink to just relax a bit, but now I know it's not. It is a choice. And I certainly like a drink, so there's nothing judgmental about whether you drink or not. It was just a challenge for me to do the event without it, and I did that challenge. And the film and TV people were all lovely and welcoming, and I felt none of the issues I have felt at literary events, but maybe that's just because it was a completely different group of people and I had nothing to lose at all. So I met some lovely people, I made lots of contacts, and we shall see where this goes. This is one of the ways I'm definitely trying to expand myself in the coming months and years, pitching my intellectual property. It's time to stop waiting to be noticed. It's time to put my work in front of people who might be interested, as Russell said. So I think this is really an interesting theme that's going on right now in an increasingly digital AI space with lots of digital things. Then doing things in person can actually be more of a superpower. And that's what Mark talks about in the interview. That's what Russell was noting there. And that's what I feel at the moment. I've also been prepping the Kickstarter launch for Blood Vintage. As a reminder, it's at jfpenn.com/Blood Vintage. But generally this week, I have been quiet and been resting and catching up on some reading. So thanks for all your emails and comments and photos this week. Antolin said on Sasha's interview, I love hearing the way both of your businesses matched economically over the first 5 years. I learn something new every time I listen to you talk. Today was to ask ChatGPT to tell me what a director of a company needs to do in their country. And as I live in France now, I will certainly do that. I love the straightforward way Sasha talks, and I listen to her podcast too. Marie-Claire said on Sasha's interview, that was brilliant. Best conversation I have listened to for ages. Congratulations to both of you for your hard work and sharing your experience. Kitty said, listening as I do some shopping at the mall. Beautiful escalators here at Emporia Mall in Malmö, Sweden. And there was lots of blue glass. It did indeed look very nice. When Sasha had to ask herself if she was doing so much she'd actually created a job for herself, I did a mental head slap. Yes, that's what I've done. Now back to listening so I can hear how she fixed her problem. And just on that, I mean, we are creating a job for ourselves because a job is work that you do, and this is work. But the point is to create a job you love as opposed to a job you hate. And certainly my old job now as an IT consultant made me miserable, whereas this job I love it. And finally, thanks to Joe, who sent me a picture from Wales. We recently held the National Eisteddfod in Ponty and spruced up the graveyard of our church, St Mary's, as there are some historic figures buried there and many graves linked to a mining disaster that took place in 1893. This grave belongs to George James Penn, with a double N, who died in 1890. It's strange to see your name on a grave. So this is really quite cool. And one of my, macabre interests, obviously I talk about gravestones and things that I like on this show, but I think if I die in a sort of normal way, as in of old age at some point, then I might even get my gravestone designed beforehand because I love gravestones and I'd really like a good one. So please leave a comment on the podcast show notes at thecreativepenn.com or on the YouTube channel or Spotify, or message me on X at thecreativepenn, or email me, send me pictures of where you're listening, joanna@thecreativepenn.com. I love to hear from you. It makes this more of a conversation. Today's show is sponsored by Kobo Writing Life, Kobo's free, fast and easy self-publishing platform. KWL was built by authors for authors, and their team of dedicated book lovers is always working hard to help you reach new readers around the world. Digital books are reaching more people than ever, and libraries are an integral part of that. You can easily reach library readers in your KWL account and earn 50% on every library sale, as there's no aggregator fee. Your book will be available to librarians to purchase for multi-loan use, but also for a one-time checkout option. And on the topic of the discussion with Mark later, we talk about wide publishing. Did you know your ebooks and audiobooks are not available in libraries unless you go wide? I've always loved libraries, so I love having my ebooks and audiobooks wide, and you can do that through Kobo Writing Life. Plus, if you're interested in taking part in library promotions, email KWL's dedicated author care team at writinglife@kobo.com and they'll add you to the mailing list. And don't forget to tell your readers they can now pick up your books in libraries. And yes, you should be able to get all my books for Joanna Penn and JF Penn in libraries. If you want to learn more about KWL, check out the Kobo Writing Life podcast, available wherever you get your podcasts and find them on social. Create your free account today at kobo.com/writinglife. This type of corporate sponsorship pays for the hosting, transcription and editing, but my time in creating the show is sponsored by my community at patreon.com/thecreativepen. Thanks to the 15 new patrons who've joined this week, and thanks to everyone who's been supporting for months and years. If you join the community, you get access to all my backlist videos and audio covering topics on creativity, writing, AI, mindset, business, marketing, all the rest, and my patron-only Q&A solo podcast episodes, the latest of which is coming this week. The Patreon is a monthly subscription, the equivalent of buying me a black coffee a month or a couple of coffees if you're feeling generous. You get access to everything. So if you get value from the show and you want more, come on over and join us at patreon.com, patreon.com/thecreativepen. Right, let's get into the interview. Mark Leslie Lefebvre is the author of horror and paranormal fiction, as well as non-fiction books for authors. He's also an editor, professional speaker, and the director of business development at Draft Digital. His latest book is A Book in Hand, Strategies for Optimizing Print Book Sales via Signings and Other In-Person Events. So welcome back to the show, Mark.
Always great to chat with you, Joanna.
Oh, yes. And obviously many listeners might know you from author events or listen to your podcast, Stark Reflections, but you were last on the show in September 2021.
Has it been that long?
Yes, it has been, which is crazy. You've been on the show lots over the years, but we co-wrote The Relaxed Author together, and we're going to come back to that later. But so it's been almost 3 years since you've been on the show. So give us a bit of an update on your writing and publishing journey, as I know you've had some big milestones lately.
Oh, yeah. So I've continued to write in my Canadian Werewolf series. Book 7, Only Monsters in the Building, that was released earlier this year, 2024, and I've got book 8 planned for mid-2025. So that's been fun, because I think in 2021, I think I had only had 2 or 3 books in that series, so I've continued to chug away at that. Only 1 book a year, just sort of standard speed. I did release a co-authored book with D.F. Hart, Accounting for Authors, which is important because she's an MBA. And that was a great co-authoring experience because she's really smart and knows everything about those. And I took the role of the author who knows nothing about finances, which is kind of close to the truth. So it was an easy role to fill. But then also with D.F. Hart and Aaron Wright and Susie O'Donnell and Bradley Charbonneau, we registered and founded the company Wide for the Win. And this is like a long, slow build for this company of all of us working collaboratively together, of trying to leverage that movement into something that could help more authors in different ways. And so that's like this long, slow thing where the company's not really earning money, yet it's breaking even, but we have these plans. I mean, for example, sales of my book, Wide for the Win, a portion of the sales goes in funds into the company, which is kind of good. So other things I've been up to is I've written 2 movie trivia books. And this is drawn upon my love of the 80s films and nostalgia. So I had the Canadian Mounted, which is a trivia guide to planes, trains, and automobiles, because it's a reference to a book that one of the characters is reading in it. And that took off beyond my wildest dreams. I thought 15, 20 people in the world would buy it, and I wrote it completely as a passion project, and it just keeps shooting. It's been out for a few years now, and every Thanksgiving season through Christmas, it sells like gangbusters. And then I did a trivia book of Die Hard called Yippee-Ki-Yay. You know the rest. And that came out. And then this December, I'm working on a book, which is a Merry Christmas, the blanker was full, which is a line Cousin Eddie uses in Christmas Vacation. And again, that's going to be like the 35th anniversary of the release of that movie. So that's been a weird tangent. Of course, I then attended Western Colorado University's Masters of Creative Writing program. taught by our mutual friend, Kevin J. Anderson. I got my concentration in publishing. Why not get a piece of paper to go with the 35 years of experience? Of course, and then 3 days after I got my degree, Liz and I flew from Colorado, where on campus, to New York City. And we got married there on the 10th anniversary of our first date. And that, ironically, was inspired not only by the fact that that's our city. We love New York City so much. We've been there about 8 times in a 6-year period. It was inspired by, I co-authored a book in my Canadian werewolf series called Lover's Moon, which is a romantic comedy tale. And there's a scene that takes place in Central Park on the Bow Bridge, the bridge where people tend to propose. And after we finished writing that, I turned to Liz and I said, we could just elope and go to New York and get married in Central Park. So we did that, which was fun. And of course, I've got a book in hand coming out. So that's the Reader's Digest version. Could you imagine if I did the long version?
Can we also say that you work at Drafter Digital? So you also have a day job?
Yeah. Well, that's only 20 hours a week. So. Okay.
It's a part-time day job, but still, I mean, just coming back on the Wide for the Win, because just for people who might not know, basically the idea is that you're not exclusive to Amazon. But it's interesting to me when I say wide now, I actually mean Kickstarter and Shopify stores. And like it used to just mean Kobo Writing Life and Apple and Google and stuff like that. But now it's much, much bigger, isn't it? Yeah.
And my version of wide has always been that. I've always thought, okay, the other retailers are just the beginning. Because direct sales, Kickstarters, and all of the Patreon and all the different things you can do, so many other platforms, so many other ways of selling. I really want to help authors understand the ability to extend and expand to audiences outside of the regular places, right? And that's kind of partly what A Book in Hand is trying to get into. Now, I'm focusing very specifically on physical products because I think a lot of indie authors don't. And I think you and I both know the value of that physical artifact, even though it's harder and it takes more work, but there can be a long-term benefit. So wide to the other retailers is a small version of wide. My wide means every possible avenue as a creator and as a storyteller.
Yeah, I really like that. And I actually think that the shift is happening. It's great that you've set that company up with the others, because I feel like maybe we're in year 1 or 2 of that being the movement. I mean, the movement in the first 15 years, really since you and I met before 2010, was very much focused on the Amazon model first, right. Even though there were other retailers, obviously. You were at Kobo back then, we met then, but now I feel like there's a real shift and people are opening up to that. So I think starting the company now, whatever you're planning to do, really is the right time, because people are realizing they need to do all this stuff, not just for the money, but also for the creative expression and the experience and the other possibilities, I think, of being out there.
Oh, for sure. And again, education and making sure people are getting good information was the key thing that we all cared about, right? Not just sharing the passion for doing all the things you can do, multiple streams of income and all those things, but also helping steer people in the right direction, because there's a lot of misinformation out there, and we wanted to get a little bit better at formalizing, trying to help authors.
Yeah. Oh, well, great. Well, we'll look forward to that. But let's get into the book. So it is mainly about in-person signings and in-person events. And I wanted to talk to you about this because I resist this completely. I have, the only signed books I've done are my Kickstarters so far. And I really love them, but I go up, I sign all the books and they get sent out. I have never done a book signing. I don't do fairs or conventions or any of that. If I go speak somewhere, I don't take books with me. So people have to bring their own copy and I'll sign them, which, I've done for people. But basically, I want you to start by convincing me and some of the listeners, why the hell should we do these types of in-person signings and events?
Okay, so I'm going to first start off, Joe, with saying I may not convince you to do the in-person events because you're already leveraging the principles behind A Book in Hand by doing what you do. You go to Book Vault, you sign the Kickstarter, right? And you have the benefit of that relationship with the people without having to sit there at a bookstore. But let's go back to the concept in general. it's derived from something that you've often said. As things move and progress in this industry, doubling down on you and your authentic self is key. And that's at the basis of this. Because especially in a tech-heavy and high-tech digital world, where, especially with AI-charged content that's can surpass even those rapid release people, like that's coming. We'll probably talk about that in a bit. It's the connections that people crave. Connections are the most fundamental reason for storytelling and for writing in books. And there's so many readers out there who want a connection with the writer. Now you, with what you've done with your magnificent Kickstarters and signing the books, and he's like, if I want a signed copy of Joanna's book, this is the way I get it. And you've done that in a way that's very comfortable for you. And I love that. And I think that's amazing. That is still part of that mandate. But sometimes an in-person event, when somebody connects with you, and I'm sure you've experienced this numerous times, people are fans, and they've heard you. And for example, I was talking to someone at a conference in Calgary who's a huge fan of yours, like I am, and is so jealous of the fact that I talk to you, I get to hang out with you and stuff like that. When they meet you, it's a real experience, and not just because of what you've done for authors, but Liz, for example, she's pretty much read most of your Morgan Sierra novels and loves them. So there's this whole cool experience of Jo's really sweet and lovely and optimistic, and yet look at all the stuff she writes.
You are the same, by the way. People should read your fiction.
It's the same thing, and people marvel at that. It's like, really? You wrote that? It's like, yeah. That's why it's therapy. That's why I'm okay as a person. I get it out in my writing. But so it brings the reader something well beyond just the words on a page. It gives them an experience. So you're creating a unique and dynamic experience for the reader that they may cherish. Maybe it's posing while you signed a book for them. Maybe it's something else in person. So I'll give you a couple examples. At one of the events I did a couple years ago at Frightmare in the Falls in Niagara Falls, Canada, I had somebody who had bought my hardcovers online, probably Amazon or some other store, came in a werewolf costume to Frightmare in the Falls just to meet me and get my book signed. And of course, I took a picture with him. And I didn't sell anything to him at that event. And it cost me a lot of money to be at that event. I did make my money back and a little bit more from that event. But me being there with somebody who loved my books so much that they show up in a costume with my books just so I can sign, that experience hopefully gave this fan something really cool that he can share with other people. Another thing I've done, there's a brewery in Hamilton, Ontario. One summer I spent, of the 10 weeks of the summer, 8 of those weeks I was there on Saturday. It cost me $25 to have a little booth on my table and sell books. And I was the only book vendor there. And there was one gentleman had handed a card. I had a download code for coupon code for Kobo and the book cover of one of my thrillers, Evasion. And he was looking around, and he's like, oh, he recognized my name because I'd edited a science fiction anthology by a small Canadian publisher years earlier. And he's like, oh, I think I have one of your books. And I gave him a card, and I said, here, go inside. There's free Wi-Fi. He's going to go in and have a beer. Check it out for free. And he comes back 45 minutes later, and he goes, do you have that book? And I said, yeah, well, I just gave it to you. I just gave you the ebook. He's like, no, I want the physical book. Can you sign it for me? I'm really enjoying it. I want to own it. And since then, this one in-person experience of just chatting and not trying to oversell someone, it's turned into a lifelong fan who buys every single one of my books and leaves reviews for them too. So that personal relationship with a reader, I think, is one of the more powerful things you can do.
Yeah, it is. And I am convinced of that. And definitely, even you and I, we've met at events over the years. And because we meet in person, I mean, yeah, we talk like this sometimes, but because we meet in person, we have more of a relationship and we've done business together. And so I think that even if it's not just the readers, if you're at a convention and no reader even buys a book, you can still connect with other creators.
Yes.
Who are there and learn a lot from them and maybe meet some of the people you're fans of and stuff like that. So why don't you just go into a bit more details about the different types of in-person events and I guess what kinds of authors they suit, because there are so many different things, aren't there?
Yeah. So, for example, I mean, the most common one authors often think of is a lonely author in the front of a bookstore in a mall, right? Sitting at a table.
Don't do that.
Well, I mean, but there are situations where it may be okay for you to do that. And some authors it's good for and others it's not. So that's one, for example, that you've got specialty shops, right? So shops that are specialty, because I write horror and I write scary stuff and I have true ghost stories and things like that. Specialty shops. I was at a gem location in the summer at a metaphysical festival, right? So people interested in metaphysical and paranormal and stuff like that. So that's a good fitting. There are friends of mine who write epic fantasy, and they do a lot of medieval fairs and sometimes dressed up as knights and stuff like that. And again, I think going to book adjacent events could be even more important. So, for example, I talked about the brewery. I was the only book vendor there. So a couple things happen when you're the only book vendor there. Not everyone reads, right? Like 1 in 4 Americans have read a book since high school. I'd say maybe even fewer than 1 in 4. But the book nerds, the book fans, really recognize when there's a book anywhere, right? Like when I see books and beer, I'm just excited about either one of them. So anytime it has anything to do with beer or books, I'm just all over it like a cheap suit. And so if you're the only book vendor there, the book people are probably going to come to you, which can be beneficial. Now, depending on the genres you write, maybe the books are not for them, but that doesn't mean that you still haven't made an impression on them. And the challenge, I think, with in-person events is you can't do cost per click measures. It's so hard to do that because online ads and stuff like that, you can kind of see how many people looked at it, how many people clicked, how many sales that translated into. With some of these things, it's this long-term touch event. So, for example, one of the events I was at, which was it was another brewery. I had somebody approach me who said, "Mark Leslie, I know your name." And it goes back to a podcast I was on 10 years earlier. It's no longer on the air. And it's like one of these things that I couldn't measure the fact that doing this podcast 10 years earlier was going to result in a book sale from somebody who walks by and sees my book. But had I not been there in person, she wouldn't have seen my book. So yeah, there's so many different local fairs, craft fairs, markets, pop-up fairs. And like I said, book adjacent specialty shops and even coffee shops and breweries and places like that. I think you're limited by your imagination, right? Like when you want to go wide, think about going wide with physical books, not necessarily just sitting and planting yourself in front of a bookstore and hope somebody takes pity on you and buys one of your books from you.
I think you're right. And actually of course, some people want to do signings in bookstores, but as you said, actually the book adjacent can be much better. And as long as you can find some overlap. Even I was thinking there's a lot of Christmas fairs as this goes out. Towards the end of the year, like the Christmas fairs, and you'll be next to people who've made knitted things or have some food things and wine and stuff. So that to me is a kind of book adjacent as well and to consider. But I think one of the things that puts me off is like you did mention there, you can't do cost per click. You can't necessarily do an ROI if you spend a couple of $100 to get a stall and then you spend, I don't know, a couple of $1,000 to print enough books to make the day worthwhile. Like if it gets sold and then you have to get them there and then maybe you have to drive there and you have to, I don't know, there's just all kinds of things that make me worry about it. So what are your tips for making the event successful in terms of preparation and then also on the day?
So yeah, there's a few things that can be helpful. I guess it depends on how many books you have. So I know this sounds weird and odd, but having 1 or 2 books is so much easier than having a lot of books, because one of the challenges is determining what I'm going to take. Now, I do a lot of events now. And for example, this week I did one this past Sunday. I have an event Thursday night, outdoor event in Uptown Waterloo, and then I'm driving almost 2 hours to Ontario's west coast, just south of Goderich, to do an open-air book festival on Saturday. So I have stock of a lot of my books, and I have a room dedicated in my basement because we live in a big enough house. That is my shipping and receiving room and my stock room where I have all my books laid out on shelves so I can track and I can see. And I use local printers. I use Amazon. I use Ingram. I use various ways to get these different books in stock. And it is expensive, right? Having 10 of this and 10 of that and 10 of the other. And then with my traditionally published books, I order from a local bookstore. They give me a discount off of trade. and I support a local business. It goes through their register, and I also end up a year later I'll get like chump change royalties from the publisher on it, but I make more margin on the ones I'm buying to resell. Anyway, so tips for making the event successful, I think, are obviously you're going to want to share that on social media. You're going to want to put it out in your author newsletter, all the ways that you let your fans know. And again, no, I don't necessarily know where all my fans are because I don't have those demographics from where they are, if they're local or nearby. But no matter where I go, I try to let them know, hey, I'm going to be here. I'm going to be in South Dakota in September, South Dakota Book Festival. I'm going to send it out my newsletter because maybe there's somebody in my newsletter who lives there. And I've had people show up at events saying, hey, yeah, I got your newsletter last week that said you were going to be here. So I made a point. It was an hour drive. I came to see you. So that's really important. I think having merchandise, props, some sort of setting based on your brand of who you are as an author in the book or the books that you write, that can work. So for example, I have Barnaby Bones. I have my skeleton. And usually the skeleton either tells people stay away from the crazy bald man, or they come running over because that's their jam. Like skeletons. Yay, love it. I also have a sign that I hang there. It's like a bat-shaped sign that says ghost stories told here. It's a great icebreaker. People will come over and say, whoa, you tell ghost stories. And then I can say, well, you say, tell me a ghost story. And I say, well, first of all, because this is an important thing, I'm not just going to tell you any ghost story. I want to find out what kind of ghost stories you like, because I have thousands. One of the more important things is not necessarily selling. It's engaging. Yes. Right? And so one of the other things, props, and even having access through our good friend Damon and BookFunnel, cards. I have cards. I have ebooks. And some people may say, well, I'd rather just get the ebooks. Hey, well, I have the whole Canadian Werewolf series here in ebook. The card, little oversized postcards that I print from Vistaprint with the cover on it, and I can sign with a marker on the front. There's room on the back to sign, but then there's also that special code. And I can do one of a combination of things. I could give something away if I feel like, hey, check this out. If you really like it, then maybe they'll come back and they'll buy the series wherever they buy ebooks, or they'll get them from the library. So I can sell the ebooks that way. I can sell the audiobooks that way. I can even add them as somebody buys the whole series. Like, here, have download the ebooks for free. So you can have these signed copies and then, or listen to the book. So I think having physical merchandise is tricky, but very expensive, of course. And again, something that will draw the right fans to your table. If you write cat mysteries, you better have some cat stuff. And with the master's program, we just released a book called Feisty Felines and Other Fantastical Familiars. And I remember having the book at a fair earlier this summer. Even just before the book officially launched, Kevin said it was okay for us to put those author copies out and start getting people excited. I mean, I had people running over when they saw the black cat on the front, because you can see it right from far away. They came over because there was a cat on it, and they were all over it. They were all over it and loved it. So that was a really exciting thing. So again, you never know what's going to catch someone's eye.
Yeah, it's a good point. And I mean, you've mentioned a couple of times there not to be kind of too salesy, like don't do the hard sell. And I remember it was one Thriller Fest. So it was in New York. And I mean, Thriller Fest have a big book sales room and people do signings in there. I mean, it is an event for authors. So everyone there is an author. And if you go, they can stock your books in the main thing. And I remember going in there, and of course, everyone wants to buy books, but I remember going in there and this guy just came up to me holding his book and said, do you want to buy this? And I was like, obviously my first reaction is, no, I don't want to buy this. But because I'm English, I'm very polite. I was like, oh, that looks very interesting. And then, of course, then you've reached out a hand and then you holding the book, and he's done what people on the street do, you know, with little things where they give it to you. And once they've given it to you, then you're like, oh, now I have to buy it. But I still remember him. This is like a decade ago. I still remember him being someone I did not want to buy his book. I don't think I did buy it in the end, but I was annoyed that he was even taking the time in my head when I wanted to be looking for books I actually wanted. So that's like an example of definitely do not do. But what are some of the other big mistakes you see newbies make with these in-person events?
Well, I want to double down on what you just said to make sure that your listeners pick up on this. The difference between making one sale, like if he was very forceful, and putting a book in your hand that you were not interested in. And that was it was an anxious, uncomfortable moment that still lives with you. He made the worst possible, one of the worst possible impressions. There could have been worse things, but he made a really bad impression. And it's still with you. That you'll probably never buy anything from that author because of that bad experience. So I would rather not make a sale now, but have a potential long-term relationship or long-term interactions with somebody. I think too many authors try so hard to get the sale now because I paid for my table and I want to make my money back or my flight or whatever it cost me to get here. They're so fixated on that they miss out on, is this the right person for the book? Is this the right reader? And that should be their focus of what they want. And so this is one of the things. So we talked about overspending. I think the merchandise and by printing too many, it's too much stock and stuff like that. But I think focusing on a legitimate and genuine connection with the right person is way more important. And that includes, and you mentioned this earlier, and it's so important, talking to the other authors, talking to the other vendors, getting to know the staff wherever it is that you happen to be, because you never know who might be or might know someone who's going to be your ideal reader. So it's not always be closing, it's always be connecting. And so, for example, if I was in that gentleman's shoes and you walk by, and probably not you because you do like dark things, but I'm standing there and somebody comes by and says, "Oh, what do you have there?" I was like, "Well, do you like horror?" He's like, "No, I'm more of a romance reader." I was like, "Oh, well, I don't really have anything for you." Well, I sort of have one book, but not really your cup of tea. But you know what? My friend Bella, just down there, you got to check out her Sullivan series. It is absolutely amazing. And if you like thrillers with some action and adventure, Marie Force has a fantastic series, right? The Fatal series. You're going to love that, right? Mm-hmm. So getting to know who else is there and what they have, because if somebody comes up to you and asks for something and you don't have what they want, don't waste their time trying to sell them something and fit the square peg in the round hole. Try to help them find what they're looking for. As a bookseller, I did this when I was managing a bookstore. People would come to my bookstore in the mall to ask non-book related questions because they knew I would do everything I could to help them because they liked me and they trusted me. And right, people buy things from people they know, like, and trust. And so they would come to the mall and say, "Oh, I'm looking for a really great whatever hardware store or something like that. I figured you'd recommend something." It has nothing to do with books, and I would help them. Because guess what? The next time they needed a book, guess who they were going to refer their friends to or come to?
Or buy a gift. I mean, that's the other thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, a lot of people are buying gifts at these things. Doesn't have to be for themselves. And then oftentimes it's like, "Oh, well, I like that guy. I'll go back and buy a gift from him."
Yeah.
Or whatever.
They had a good experience. So imagine that person came by and they said, like, "I've got this book. It's, whatever this genre that you're not interested in." And just, you had a nice short conversation and he wasn't pushy. Didn't try to force it on you. And then you remembered, "Oh, that was an interesting book." And then you're talking to someone in the coffee shop later on when you're in line and they're like, "Oh, I really like this." And you're like, "Oh, there's a guy. He's just around the corner by the red pillar." Look for him. Yeah. I bet you his book would be good for you because you never know. And again, the biggest challenge, especially with indie authors who grew up trained digitally on ebooks and cost per click and all that, you can't measure that. And that's probably the most frustrating aspect.
Yeah. And I also kind of think, you said there about thinking about the other person. You also have to think about the kind of event and also not giving people too much choice. So both you and I have a lot of books and it's expensive to print everything, multiple, but also if I take every single one of my books, people are like, "Oh, too much choice." And there's all those studies, aren't there, that if you give people 3 different jams, for example, they're more likely to buy one than if you have 20 different jams.
Yes.
So you have to really think about what event it is. I was actually just thinking then, because I am considering doing a Christmas market here in Bath. Yeah. And I was like, well, which books would I take? And then I remembered my mum has a book called A Summerfield Christmas Wedding. I know. And I'm like, well, of course, I would take my mum's book and then I'd have maybe my thrillers and some nonfiction and just one of each or 2 of each. And then I'd have my mum's Christmas book and maybe that would be the one that sold a ton.
Well, that's the primary display. But then somebody's like, "Oh, I love Christmas stuff, but I have a friend who loves the archaeological thrillers, right? Or whatever, because you've got so many different things now. But that's the other thing is, Yeah, maybe just feature the first book in the series and then have the other ones kind of subtly off to the side, not as visible until someone really gets into it, right?
Or even
and that's the other trick, yeah.
Yeah, or even just the first one in each series, and then when in talking to people, you can say, well, look, I have an email list. I can send you the details of the other books. Because I was going to ask you about this. So I'm kind of trained on the very much the anti-spam thing is I have never added someone to my email list manually. But when I hear from people like yourself who do live events, you keep a manual list and then you are adding people. So how do you deal with that?
I stopped doing that. I used to have a clipboard. And one of the problems with the clipboard is people write like they're doctors, right? Like a prescription. You can't read what their name is anyway. I stopped with the manual board and I go with a QR code that brings them right to my list. Say, hey, you want this book for free? Scan here. And you get the download. You can get it on your phone with the free book funnel app. You can start reading it now if you want. And then you're on my newsletter list and I can let you know what's going on. And so I find that's way better because it's not forcing anyone to have to take a clipboard and write things down. And then you have to, again, it's manual labor to go and enter it in.
So just a QR code on a
because then most people have a smartphone on them, so they can quickly and instantly sign up for your newsletter right then and there and get the free book right away. So, one of the things I've done as well is, so in my Canadian Werewolf series, for example, I have a little postcard and I have a sign with a QR code on it where you can download the ebook or the audiobook or both through BookFunnel on a BookFunnel landing page. QR code takes you right to the BookFunnel landing page. And again, it's not you have to opt in for my newsletter because I'm sorry, I pay for enough deadbeats on my newsletter who do SFA. I'm sorry. And I'm pushing really hard right now on my newsletter. And I'm
get
happy.
Rid of people.
Well, if you're not gonna click things or respond or reply or buy things from me, what the hell are you doing there? Get the hell out, right? You're just dead weight. And you're costing me a lot of money. I don't mean to be mean, but I would rather have somebody who's engaged and wants to hear from me on the newsletter because those are my people. The other people are just, they got a free book once and they're just, you're costing me money.
Hanging out, yeah.
So again, I don't force them. Like even when they get the free download, it's an option and I don't have it clicked by default. They have to choose to be on my newsletter because I don't want to put on my newsletter unless they want to be on my newsletter. So I give them the option.
That's a good tip. The other thing I wonder about is the money side. So, of course, you mentioned at some events there is a bookseller there and it will go through them. But do you need to have like a Square or some kind of mobile payment system? Because a lot of people don't even have cash anymore.
Yeah, great question. And I used to have one of the small Square readers that tapped and connected to my phone. And it was just problematic software-wise. I ended up investing last year in one of the full-size Square readers that has the receipt printer built into it. And it cost me a few $100s, so it cost me a few hundred. But the other thing I like about it is I can print a receipt for someone right there on the spot if they want one. I can also email, text, all the things that they want. All my inventory's in there. And I used to, when it was a cash sale, I had a little notebook where I would say, so it took $10 for this book and whatever. And I remember one time at one of the really busy events I was at, my sister was there helping. She's a lovely, lovely person, of course, but not necessarily, she makes me look organized. And she forgot to mark down which books I sold for cash. And so when I go to balance the next day, when I was like, I have all this money. I don't know right? So I even put my cash sales through the Square reader so I can A, print a receipt for them. B, I used to print a second receipt for myself, throw it in the cash box, and I knew I sold that book for cash or these books for cash, right?
Yeah.
But then in Square, I run a report the next day. And if it's just a cash sale or credit or debit or whatever it is, I can see exactly what I sold, and all of it's through this same system. So
that's really good. Okay,
I have something I can load to Scribe Count, right? So I can track because I'm tracking my sales in many different ways, but it's also a report that's useful for me to understand. And then I can go back. Now, I don't have my inventory properly managed where I know I go downstairs and look at the shelf and go, okay, I have 10 copies of this book. I better order some soon because I've got so many shows coming up. And then you've got to do it in time, right?
Yeah.
I'm in Canada, so some of the printing is locally here with a printer. Some of it's printed in Amazon Canada now that they print. But when it's coming from Ingram in the States, crossing the border, that can take, you have to plan weeks in advance. And
I was thinking about this for so let's say Author Nation, you and I are both going to be there. It's in Las Vegas. I know they have in that hotel, they have a FedEx or a business shipping site. But I was even wondering about, I know it's Amazon, but an Amazon, they have those lockers and things like that.
Yeah,
so do you do shipping to the points where you're flying to?
I have not yet done in-person sales outside of Canada because
It's just easy. I mean, you've got it.
Customs fees and getting nailed for selling across the border. And so I have not yet. I have shipped books to the States to put in consignment with a vendor who's there, like a bookseller.
Yeah.
I've drop shipped to hotels and stuff like that. And I've also shipped books or brought books to give away. I learned that from Becca Syme. It's just too much of a hassle to fill out all the paperwork.
Or I was wondering, I don't know if I'm going to do this, but one could do pre-sales of like the special editions, get the money now, and then then ship them all to Las Vegas, and then give the people who are there those signed copies that they have pre-bought. So you're not doing the sales on site, you're doing them beforehand.
And maybe the pre-bought allows you to buy an extra bag that you check in, right? That's filled with these books, right? So
No, I would just ship them.
Oh, you would ship them
to a location. I did notice that last time.
But you're paying taxes. But you're paying taxes to your government, right? No, but you're paying. So if you're selling, you're paying taxes through your online system. It's already taken care of, so you don't have to worry about any of that. Which I think, Joe, that's genius. I love that.
Well, I think it's a way that, because I mean, obviously in America, a lot of people are flying around to these things. But I mean, here, well, it was just something I was thinking about. I was thinking, well, if I did this, how would I do it in a way that's easy enough? I think this is the big thing. Like even the Square Reader, you said that it's not a couple of $100 doesn't worry me. It's the how nervous I would be using it for the first time, or like screwing it up when I was had someone buying a Christmas, or somebody who didn't really know how to do it. But I do think the pandemic's probably changed it though, because people know how to use QR codes and everyone pays with a tap now, don't they?
They do, yeah. And the other thing too, I mean, I guess I have 20 plus years working in physical bookstores as a so Christmas, so that I don't get stressed out by that.
Yeah, you don't get stressed.
I mean, if I ever have a line like that again, oh my God, like Brandon Sanderson style lines, that'd be nice.
You'll be happy, yeah. And also, people are nice. I mean, if your reader isn't working, whatever, you sort it out. Okay, well, that's loads of my questions. Is there anything else you think we haven't covered that people need to know? I mean, obviously, they can get your book, a book in hand. But is there anything else? Oh, well, let me bring something up, actually. I saw a post from an author who did Comic-Con, I think, or one of these bigger conventions, and they said, that's my last time. It's too exhausting. So there's that energy management as well as expensive. And it's like that, I'm done. And so that would be a question. How do you manage your energy, and how are you like, okay, I've done enough events, or are you just your Energizer bunny self and just go forever?
It is so tough because I'm an omnivert and I do get exhausted from being on because I look at it as being on. So that is tough. That is really, really hard. And you have to know yourself and understand yourself and what you need. And you can't overextend yourself. That's so important, whether it's trying to write books too fast, whether it's trying to do in-person events when that's not your comfort level. So that's really an important thing. And I can't advise you to do anything other than listen to your body and listen to your emotions and listen to how you feel, right? It's like I eat this thing and I feel something afterwards. Stop eating that thing, right? So that's so important now. But I also, so in a weird way, it exhausts me. But when I connect with somebody who's come back because they bought something last time, like, oh, you're here again. I'm good because I wanted to get a signed copy of the next book in the series, or I really wanted to talk to me about it. Because again, I'm creating an experience for that reader. And when you create an experience for that person, that's marketing. I know Dean Wesley Smith had shared one time that a print book is on average handled by 7 people. And so that print book that somebody bought from you and has signed from you, maybe they have a picture with you and that's exciting. That's something they're going to share. And that's the marketing. That's the Jim Bain 7 points of, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. They keep seeing your book covers at billboard. That's really important. And then the other thing it's funny, and Liz and I had this conversation. I did Frightmare in the Falls in Niagara Falls a few years ago that it was far enough away I had to stay in a hotel overnight. The table cost me a lot of money, and I had my stepdaughter come in one day on the Saturday because I could handle the Friday night and the Sunday myself because they were slower. But the Saturday was going to be a busy day. So I paid her to come in and spend the day with me. And by the time I figured out, I think I brought in maybe $1,500 or $1,600 in sales. And by the time I calculated the cost of my inventory, plus the costs of all the other costs and the meals and the whatever, I think I made $100 off that conference. Yeah. And it was like a 3-day weekend.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. And Liz goes, well, that was a huge waste. Mm. And I said, well, I'm ahead slightly. Yes, it was a lot of work for $100, but that was the event where the gentleman showed up in a werewolf costume. That was the event where new people who had never bought any of my books or even knew who I was walked away with some of my books. That event was a marketing campaign, no different than like an Amazon ad campaign that your book is seen by somebody who may be interested in buying it. So I say, okay, yes, I only walked away $100 richer from this event, but I have the experience, and I've given lots of people the experience of who Mark Leslie is, the name I write most of my stuff under. And that, again, is so frustrating because I can't point to anything and go, look, Liz, my sales went up magically on Amazon a week after.
Well, I think the other thing here, actually, this is important, and I've done this many times, is you take photos that you can use for social media that make things look bigger than they actually are anyway.
Yes.
I mean, even my signings at Book Vault, Book Vault is a printing factory. It's not like some sexy location, although, of course, book printing is very sexy.
It is very sexy, yes.
They've just got a room. Well, it's not even a special room. It's like a corridor, and we set up a thing. But the angle you take photos at can make things look
I know.
better.
They look amazing. I'm like, I can't wait to have that one day. Meanwhile, you're in a hallway, right?
Yeah, you're in a hallway. But I think, and if you're at an event, I mean, you and I, do you remember when we did Frankfurt Book Fair together? When you had hair?
Yeah, I had some hair, yes.
You had some hair back then, and there's some pictures of us at Frankfurt Book Fair. Now, the pictures
we look pretty amazing. They're like a huge audience.
Yeah, but actually, we were in some random hall. There's loads of halls. I mean, it's a huge fair, right? There was hardly anyone there, but we did it, and the photos look really good. So, I mean, that's
all six people in the audience looked way bigger.
Yeah, so I guess that's the other thing. If you do it and you're doing it for marketing, make sure you get pictures and try and get just get your friend or some passerby to kind of look as if you're signing or something, and then you can use that in social media, and that will help too.
Oh, for sure. I mean, and the same thing too. I've been at book events where nobody showed up. I was in Vancouver once at an independent bookstore for 3 hours signing copies of one of my books, Haunted Bookstores and Libraries, Tomes of Terror. And nobody showed up. No, I didn't sell a single book to anybody, even though my publisher advertised it. I advertised it, put it all on social media. I spent 3 hours hanging out with the staff and having a blast chatting with them. Instead of being a miserable guy who was all upset because nobody came to my party, I had a blast with these booksellers, and I'm positive they hand sold my book when I left. Because, again, the experience we had together was richer than me just selling a few books that day.
Yeah. Always be connecting. That's probably the quote of the day. So we're almost out of time, but I did want to come to a sort of bigger question. Now, you and I co-wrote The Relaxed Author back in 2021. And the reason we did that, well, we had a conversation and one of the listeners were like, oh, you should write that book. So we did. And at the
Thank
time,
you, Joe's listeners.
it was at the time we wrote it because authors were really stressed. And at that point, it was really the end of organic reach, the end of organic reach on Amazon, the end of organic reach on Facebook. And it was a real shift to paid ads. There was a lot of angst about KU. That was what was going on in that period. But now things, I mean, that's kind of as normal now. The changes have really sped up. We've got generative AI and the impacts of that. And there's always stress in the author community. But I wondered what your thoughts were on how can authors be more relaxed about change in general? And any thoughts on the kind of impact of AI, given that you also work at Drafted Digital, or your own personal thoughts either?
Well, it's a tough one because it's like the exponential. The change is just growing at a faster rate than we can keep up with. And there's more things to be anxious about. So the first thing is take a deep breath. And I know it's a weird question to ask, but I mean, it's like, how does this affect my goals and my long-term plans? Or am I just fixated on looking at a dashboard all day instead of getting the important work done? I think people need that more. I need that more. Joe, I pick up the book sometimes because I get anxious about stuff, and I pick it up and I go, we said some pretty smart things here.
We did.
We should listen to ourselves every once in a while. And I have to, so if I have to remind myself to listen to the things, right? I mean, I can imagine that there's a lot of change. So here's a couple things we know. Technology is not going to get put back in Pandora's box. It's not going to go back into the bottle, right? It's going to keep going and it's going to grow. Whether we ride the wave or we get swallowed by their wave. And so there may be ways to look at a new technology. And I know this is hard, especially in this divisive world we live in, but look at something with a mind not of, I don't like this because I've never tried this vegetable, but I think it tastes horrible, so I'm never going to try it. Try to look at it with an open mind and try to see if there's a way within your goal set and within the things that are important to you and that you value, whether it's your moralistic values or the things that you just value in general. Are there ways that you can leverage that for your author business in ways that can ease some of the pain points that you have? Because we all have pain points, right? Mm. And so you may never be somebody who's going to use a technology a certain way, but you may want to use it in another way that can ease you. So for example, I've been using, thanks to you, and I got the code off of your website, the Pro Writing Aid. I got a discount on that. And I clean up my manuscript with Pro Writing Aid before I send it to a human editor because it saves me money and probably saves my editor a lot of anxiety and ulcers because it cleans up some of the stuff, some of the boring, redundant stuff I always do, the habits I have as a writer. And so there are ways that technology can help in so many different ways if we're willing to work with it. And I don't just mean use it, I mean work with it. I mean understand. No different than understanding how to operate a vehicle. No different than how to understand operating a word processing software, right? I had to go from typewriter to WordPerfect and well, actually paperback writer, then WordPerfect, then Microsoft Word, right? Over the years. But I started off pen and paper and then I went to typewriter because I'm one of those old guys. And so I see it's no different. And sometimes we get so anxious about the extremes of what this could do, as opposed to looking at what it could do. It could be bad, but it could also do these things for us. And it's a hard thing for us to do. So deep breath is usually where I often start. And I'm a guy with high blood pressure, so I have to be and I get excited very easily. So I have to monitor this. So I'm speaking from personal experience. Stop and take a deep breath.
Yeah. And also, I think this does come back. You mentioned it earlier, obviously, the double down on being human and in-person events. And to me, there are things that AI is useful for. And certainly for me, cover design, you mentioned editing there, marketing. Oh, my goodness.
Yes.
I think most authors are going to be very happy the day we can just tell an AI agent, here's my book, please go market it. And,
yes.
That will be amazing. And that's coming.
Marketing.
Yeah.
They hate marketing. It stresses them out.
Exactly. And so there are things that we very, very much would like that to do. But in-person events, for sure, the robots will come at some point, but it's going to be a human sitting behind a table at a human event selling books to other humans. So you can't get much more human than selling books at physical events, I suppose.
Yeah. It's one of the things that allows you to stand out in the digital slush pile, right? In the digital masses is the real human. Now, I can talk about the story I wrote because I know it inside out. Because I spent 10 years writing this book or whatever it was, right? You know this better than anyone else. And so you can connect with people in a more meaningful way that even as the technology that exists can't respond and interact and engage the way you can. You are the best marketing tool for your book.
Fantastic. So where can people find all your books and everything you do online?
Well, you can find me at markleslie.ca. You can find links to me on all the social medias, etc. And if you're looking for a book in hand, the pre-order links, etc. for this book will be at markleslie.ca/a book in hand. Nice and easy.
Brilliant. Well, thanks so much for your time, Mark. That was great.
So I hope you found the discussion with Mark interesting and useful for your author business. And as ever, I love to hear your thoughts. Please leave a comment on the podcast show notes at thecreativepenn.com or on the YouTube channel, message me on X at thecreativepenn or email me, Joanna at thecreativepenn.com. Send me pictures of where you're listening. Next Monday, I'm talking about writing a funny novel with Dave Cohen, with tips on incorporating humour into other kinds of books as well. In the meantime, happy writing, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for listening today. I hope you found it helpful. You can find the backlist episodes and show notes at thecreativepenn.com/podcast. And you can get your free author blueprint at thecreativepenn.com/blueprint. If you'd like to connect, you can find me on Facebook and X at The Creative Penn, or on Instagram and Facebook at JFPennAuthor. Happy writing, and I'll see you next time.